Hi everyone, I'm Jane and today we are painting in my new home studio. I painted these walls this gorgeous aqua just for you guys. It was a really terrible gray with a fluorescent green racing stripe. It was weird. Today we're going to be painting this Starry night for Lovebirds, and a bunch of you have asked me for couples paintings or just paintings on more than one canvas. So hopefully this kind of fits the bill for both of those requests. I'm painting this today on two 12 by 12 inch canvases, but any size and shape of canvas that you like will work. This was a really fun video to shoot. I had a general idea of what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to do the swirly background and I knew what colors and that I wanted birds on a line. But while going through all of my canvases that I had to paint on, these were the only two that I felt would be right for it. So I hadn't planned on doing a double canvas painting today. And then halfway through the painting, I decided to add the stars and the swirling motion into those stars. So that was kind of fun to come to a video and not have a very specific idea of what I was going to show you. So that's always a little bit scary for me because there's always the off chance that I'm going to totally destroy it and then not have a video for you. So I'm pretty pleased with the way they turned out. This is a really simple painting. If you've never painted before, this might be a good place to start. If you have been painting for a little while, you can get really creative with this and make it a little bit more detailed if you like. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. For today's painting, we're going to use the following colors: Phthalo Blue, Phthalo Green, Dioxazine Purple, Primary Yellow, Titanium White, and Mars Black. I'm going to be using a 1-inch flat brush, a 1/2-inch angle brush, and a round brush. This one's about 1/4 of an inch wide at the base. I'm also going to be using a piece of chalk just to sketch out the flow direction that we want in our background. Today I'm painting on two 12 by 12 inch canvases to make one continual painting. Now you'll notice behind here I've got another canvas, and that is just to give these canvases a little bit more structure so they don't move around too much. Since my easel is very narrow at the top here, it's kind of hard to clamp these two in and keep them steady. So I just have this extra canvas back there to give a little bit more support. So go ahead and grab everything you need and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our chalk and we're going to draw on here the direction that we want our sky to be moving. So I'm going to start over here with a curl, and I'm going to let it go off the canvas because I think that's really interesting. So I'm going to follow with my eye where I think that curl would go and where it would come back. Bring it over to this canvas and make another curl. And they don't have to be the same. And you don't have to stick to this once you start painting. You can make adjustments once you start laying the paint down. So I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush and I'm going to wet it in the jar and wipe it off on the edge. Now I'm going to grab a little bit of blue, just a bit. I'm always going to use white with all of the colors because I don't want the colors in the background to become too intense and take over the foreground that we're going to do. So every time I grab a color, I'm going to mix it with some white. And I'm just kind of picking it up on my brush. I'm not mixing them together because I like the streaky look that you get. So I'm going to use my brush on the edge like this and just kind of crush it in. You can use it flat if you want, you'll just get a wider line. So I'm just going to bring it like that, and notice how one side is blue and one side is white. And kind of follow my line. Just pretend like that split in the canvases isn't even there. Now I'm just going to grab some more white. I still have some blue on here. And I'm going to start whitening this out. And you don't have to be real exact with this. Just lay down the colors wherever you feel like you want them. Don't focus on blending. Just let them be streaky and however you want them to be. To make this part a little bit easier for you, let me give you an example of what I'm doing. So I'm using the edge of my brush But if I keep it stationary, so if I'm holding my brush like this and I'm using the edge, if I keep it stationary as I go around, it's gonna get wider and narrower in areas. So kind of like calligraphy, right? You've got a wide end and it goes narrow, wide as you go like that. So what I'm gonna do is, as I go around, I'm gonna turn my brush like that so that I can keep a narrow line. So let me show you. I'm gonna get some white and I think a little bit of the phthalo green. And so I've got my brush horizontal here, like that. And as I come up this edge, I'm gonna turn it so it's vertical. So my brush is gonna follow the line that I'm doing. Now, if you don't wanna do that, or it's hard for you to think of that, you can keep your brush the same. Let me show you what would happen if you keep it the same and not turn it. So I'm gonna start here horizontally, and as I come up, my brush stroke gets wider. So it's wide there, and it's narrow there. So whatever you wanna do, I like to turn the brush so that I can control the width of the line. But if you don't want to, that's totally fine too. Keep a little extra water on your brush so that the paint spreads nicely. And I'm not cleaning off my brush. So I'm gonna get more white and I'm gonna go into my Dioxazine Purple. Now typically I would clean off my brush if I were using purple and green at the same time, but the Dioxazine Purple and the phthalo green actually mix nicely together, so I'm not too worried about getting a mess with those. So I'm gonna start this one up here a little higher, bring it around on the outside. Turning your brush like that as you go, it does take a little bit of a practice. So if you're having a hard time with it, just practice. What I'm doing is kind of rolling it in my fingertips as I go. As I come around, I'm just rolling it. So I'm not like getting my arm really in this weird angle. I'm just kind of rolling the brush like that. So I know with this new camera angle, it's probably kind of hard for you to see a lot of the details, like when I'm zoomed in closer. But as soon as I get my order from B&H, which I got notified yesterday that it has shipped, so for my next video next week, I should have 2 different camera angles. One similar to this one right now, and one that shows you close up and details. So with this video today, I wasn't terribly worried about showing you a lot of details because this is a fairly simple painting. But for future videos, you're gonna have a much easier time seeing what's happening, see more of what's happening even than some of my previous videos. So I'm really excited about that. But from here, just keep adding your colors however you want them until the whole thing is filled in. Once you get to the point where your curl meets the line here, you can just kind of pull the brush down into the little corner. I I've done it a couple of times where I've gone like that and then tried to bring it this way, and it ends up making the curl look confined. So I just kind of like it when it ends at this line. And that's the same thing I'm doing right here. And so even though we're using just the edge of the brush, and this brush is fairly narrow, I would say it's maybe 1/4 of an inch thick there, the harder I push, the wider the line I'm gonna get. For example, right here, everything after the green, this purple blue area, I used the edge, but I pushed hard and I get a nice wide line. So whatever kind of brush you're using for this, I would recommend that it's a firm brush, because the softer your brush is, if you're trying to use it on the edge like this, you're gonna have a hard time controlling the paint and getting an even spread. So if your brush is nice and firm, it helps force that paint down into the fibers of the canvas. So I get a lot of questions from you guys about, you know, what's better, a firm brush or a soft brush. And really it depends on what you're doing and what area of the painting you're working on. For me, with a background, I almost always prefer a firm brush, because it really helps spread the paint around. A soft brush seems to make that really difficult for me. Again, just pretend like that split where the two canvases meet isn't even there. Don't try to keep anything confined on one canvas or the other. And you can switch colors in the middle of a line if you want. Just because you start with purple, for example, like let's say I start with purple right here. And then when I need more paint, if I go back and I get blue and finish that line in blue, that's okay. This isn't science. It's not a test. There's no right and wrong. Just do it however you like and whatever feels the most natural to you. I'm just gonna get some white and make sure this center part is filled in. And these little corners, just fill them in however you can. And then just make sure your brush strokes are smoothed out to move in the same direction as everything else. Okay, so there's our background. And really you can do this in any color you like. Just pick 3 colors that you think go well together and that you know mix well together. Make sure you use some white so it's not too intense, and then just go for it. If you're gonna do this as a couples painting, you know, you paint one and your significant other paints the other one, each of you take your brush strokes and let it overlap a little bit into the next canvas. And if you're doing that back and forth, so if I'm painting this one and you're painting this one, I'm gonna bring my brush stroke and let it end a few inches into here. Then when you come along there, you're gonna bring your brush stroke and let it end a few inches into mine. And that way you get kind of a woven effect in between them. You won't have a hard line where it makes it obvious that 2 different people painted them. So I'm gonna let this dry completely, and then we'll come back and we'll put our wire for our birds. So now we're gonna draw the wire for the birds, and I'm gonna use my 1/2" angle brush. But if you're more comfortable using a round brush or a different brush, that's fine. You can use whatever you like. Now there's several ways that we can draw a straight line. One, you can just eyeball it, stand directly in the center of it, put your hand on your canvas, and just draw the line across. I'm fairly practiced at doing that, so that's probably what I would normally do. But if you're not practiced at it, then don't do it that way. Another way you can do it is a way we've talked about before, where you take your canvas and you flip it on its side and let gravity pull your arm straight down. That's what I do a lot, but with this setup, with the two canvases, that's gonna be a lot of effort to unhook them, get them set up, hope that they stay there, and then take them down later and put them back. So I'm not gonna do that today. Another way you can do it, if you're not comfortable just freehanding it, is to use a ruler. So I have a ruler here, and that's what we're gonna do. And I'm gonna get paint all over my ruler, and I really don't care. If you don't wanna get paint on your ruler, then I would just suggest getting a paper towel and immediately wiping it off. Dampen the paper towel with a little bit of water and then wipe it off. But don't try not to get paint on the ruler, because you'll put a lot of energy into that, and then your line may end up being kind of wobbly. So just let the paint get on the ruler. So I'm gonna take my brush, wet it in my jar, and wipe it off on the edge just a little bit. We don't want it to be too dry, because the extra water is gonna help the paint spread more. So I'm just gonna pull out a little bit of paint and load it onto both sides of my brush. You could even take a pencil or your chalk and draw the line with the ruler first and then paint it in. So I'm just gonna take this and make it about what I think is level. If you need to measure it out, you can absolutely do that too. I tend to like to just do things quickly. So I'm gonna take this, put my brush at the top of it, and just run it down the edge. Get more paint if you need to. And there's your line. Somehow my paint leaked a little bit under my line here, so I'm just gonna take my flat brush that's cleaned off and then just lightly kind of wipe that away before it dries. Make sure you get anything like that before it dries. If you want your line a little bit wider after you've drawn it on there, then just put your hand on your canvas and kind of thicken out that line a bit. Now I put my line just a little below the center mark. You can put it anywhere you like on here. It doesn't have to be right where I put mine. So now we're gonna draw our birds, and I'm gonna use my chalk because I wanna put my birds so that they are both close to the center, but I don't want one to overlap the other side. And I don't wanna put them, so into each canvas that there's a big gap in between them. So I'm just gonna sketch out kind of where I want them to be at first. I think I want my first one right about like that, kind of sitting in that direction. And you can have them facing each other or facing away from each other, whatever you wanna do. I think I'm gonna do my other one over here, kind of facing into the center, but not in the exact same position. But also, I'm gonna make the tail point in a little bit of a different direction. The cool thing about birds is they don't always just go in a line. And you can make their tails and their heads point in any direction, and it gives the impression that they're sitting in a different way. So I'm gonna have this one kind of looking this way. Since I'm gonna put a big moon up in this other corner, I'm gonna have them both looking toward that moon. So this one, his beak is going to be pointing that way and his body like this. This one, I want it to look like he's got his body angled toward this bird, but he's sitting in a little bit of a different position. So his tail isn't going to be straight down from his back, and I'm going to have his beak pointing that way as well. So I'm going to take my little round brush that I've wet in my jar and load it up with some black paint. And I'm going to start with their bodies. And I want these to be really simple birds, but you can put as much detail into them as you want. So I'm going to bring the body around about like that. And notice I let the bottom come just a bit below the wire. If it stops right at the wire, it's just going to look kind of awkward. So let it come down below the wire just a little bit. And then I'm going to put a head on her, and I don't want to draw the head sitting right on top like that, because then it's going to be hard to smooth into her body. Her head might look too big and she'll kind of look like a weird snowman. So I'm going to draw a circle and bring it down into the body a little bit. And it's not quite as wide as the body either. And I'm going to bring her tail down about like that. And same on him. We'll give him, I'm going to actually move him a little closer to the edge here. Bring his body around like that, just below the wire a bit. And put his head on into his body. And notice her head is right in the center. His head is slightly off to the right, since I'm going to have his face turned this way. So I didn't put it right in the center. And his tail is going to come down about like this. And we'll make him a little wider. All right, now let's just fill them in. Keep an extra drip of water on your brush. This canvas has a pretty good tooth on it, so if I don't use enough water, I'm going to have a hard time filling it in. Don't worry about the outside shape right now, just fill it in. All right, let's define their shapes a little bit more. Now I want these birds to be very representational. I don't want them to actually look like birds. So I'm gonna bring her head, I'm just gonna kind of cut off that line, give her a little bit more of a shoulder. And same on the front here, but I'm not going to give her a shoulder on the front here because I want that to look like maybe her belly. So I'm actually going to fatten her out right there at the bottom. But you really can shape these however you like. I just think that the best advice I can give you on here is to make sure you don't have that angle at their neck so they have that weird snowman look that we talked about. Smooth out her tail a little on the edge here. Notice I have my hand on the canvas. That way I can just use the tips of my fingers to have a lot of control. And look, I'm holding my paintbrush like a pen. I'm not holding it clear back here, especially if I have my hand on the canvas. It's really hard for me to get in there. So I'm holding it like a pencil right down here at the bottom. And I'm almost using it like a pencil. Her tail wants to be a little bit pointier than his, so we're just going to let that happen. Just keep shaping them until they look like what you want them to look like. Now I'm going to give her a beak, and so to do that I'm going to push my brush flat. See how my round brush now doesn't have a point? It's almost got a chisel. I'm just going to decide where I want her beak and make a little bit of a line. And then from the tip of that line, I'm going to bring it down into her body a bit, so it's a smooth transition. And the same at the top. And now we're just going to refine him the same way. Since his head is turned this way, to me it looks like if we could see his spine, it would be from the center of his head here, and it would come down like this and toward his tail. So this to me would be almost like his side. You'd almost be able to see his side here. This would be more of where his shoulder is. So I'm going to smooth, this is the back of his head right here. I'm going to smooth it down and give him a little bit of a shoulder here. And a little bit of a belly. And smooth that into his tail. And here I'm going to smooth that just kind of straight down into his body and give him a little bit of a shoulder here as well, but not a belly. And just make sure his tail is filled in properly, and I think I'm going to make it a little bit longer. Always start just a little bit smaller than you think you want, because you can always make it bigger, but you can't really make it smaller very easily. Shape the ends of their tail however you want. If you want a point or a curl or straight or even fuzzy, that's okay. And I'm going to do the same thing for his beak. I'm going to make my brush flat. And I want him facing pretty much the same direction that she is. So just a little line out, and then smooth that line in. But if you want them facing each other, or maybe their beaks are touching, you can do all of those things. If you're painting this for your family, you can do little birds that represent kids. You can add as many as you like here. Now once these guys are completely dry, you can come back in and just wipe off that chalk. And then you can use a wet paintbrush and wipe all of that extra chalk away too. Now we're going to paint our moon. And I'm going to use my 1/2 inch angle brush. And I'm going to take some of this primary yellow. I'm going to load up quite a bit of it. And I'm going to bring it over to my white and mix a bit of white into it, just to help the yellow not be so transparent. If it's a little lighter than what you actually want right now, that's okay, because we want it to cover the background. You can add more yellow afterwards. So I'm using my angle brush, and remember that you always drag the tip of the brush. I'm going to place it right about where I want my moon to be and draw kind of a C shape. And again, like with the background when we were painting the swirls, I'm kind of rolling the brush as I go. So that's about the shape that we're gonna do. Now we're just gonna fill it out, make it fatter toward the back. And you can push a little harder on your brush to get a fatter line. And just keep refining the moon until it's exactly the way you want it to be. And because this is an abstract moon, right, this is not what the moon actually looks like, it doesn't even have to be perfectly symmetrical. You can have a moon that's got kind of a different shape. If it helps you to draw in your moon first with chalk or a pencil, that's okay, you can go ahead and do that. Another thing you could do is you could cut it out of a piece of paper, tape the paper to this, and then fill it in. All right, so that's about how I want my moon. I'm gonna grab just gobs of this yellow. See how thick that is? And I'm gonna start streaking it in here to brighten it up. Kind of like Van Gogh's moon in Starry Night. If you look at it, the paint is so thick. That's kind of the look I'm going for here. And I'm gonna get a little more white, maybe not quite that much, and add some highlights in white here and there. All right, now what I'm gonna do is plan out where I want some stars. And so you can do this with your chalk, or you can just go right to it with your paint. I'm gonna use my chalk, and I'm just gonna kind of draw some dots. I want my stars to kind of be coming from the moon and follow the shape of my background swirl, but it doesn't have to be right on the center line. You can scatter them around, but I'm gonna basically keep them moving in that type of a shape. So I'm gonna come from here and just make some dots, just kind of wherever I think I want some stars. And I don't have to end up using all of these dots, and I can even add some more. This is just to give me an idea. And I probably should have picked something other than purple chalk for this, but it's all I had with me. So I apologize if this is kind of hard to see. But once I start adding the color, you'll be able to see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to take my round brush and just get a yellow-white mixture. And some of these stars I'm going to make bigger, some of them I'm going to make smaller. But to start off, I'm just going to make them kind of small. And I'm just going to use the end of the brush and just kind of tap where I want a star. Just a small tap like that. Don't put them on top of your line, but also don't put them so far away from your line that it seems like the line is kind of cutting through and blocking them out. All right, so there are my stars. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through again, and I'm gonna make some of them bigger, and I'm gonna leave some of them smaller. So I'm gonna get some more yellow white, Keep a little extra water on your brush if you need to. And I'm gonna use my paint a little bit thicker this time. I'm gonna start right back up here and just kind of make a little swirl where I want a larger star. Still just using the end of the brush. This one, since it's right in front of his face, I'm not going to make it look bigger because to me that will make it seem like he's looking at that star rather than the moon. I'm going to take that one right at the edge so it looks like the power line is blocking out a part of it. Now these stars that I'm doing here, this was just kind of a spur of the moment decision. So I hope it turns out good. I'm gonna have this one in the center be even larger, I think. It seems like they're coming from the moon and they're swirling down toward this guy. All right, now I'm gonna get big amounts of this bright yellow. See how I've got it globbed on there? And I'm gonna come around and I'm gonna put a dot in probably all of the stars. I might leave a couple of them being kind of faint. The fainter they are, the more pushed back into the distance they're gonna seem. The brighter they are, the more, and the bigger they are, the more forward they're gonna seem. So I'm gonna put kind of a glob in there. And in these bigger ones too, I'll just push a little bit harder to get a bigger glob in there. So the smaller a star is, like this one you can barely see, I'm just gonna leave it like that. If a star is bigger, I'm definitely putting a glob in it. Once you've done that, you can go through and add like some more little ones here and there, wherever you feel like you're kind of missing a little bit. I'm just barely touching the canvas, getting some teeny ones on there. I definitely want to add a few more around here, since this is kind of where they're all culminating. All right, now I'm gonna get some, well, a little bit of yellow. I've got some yellow on here, and I'm gonna grab some white. Now the white I'm gonna reserve for my largest stars. And again, I'm just kind of blobbing it into the middle. Getting a pretty good impasto look here, and that's when the paint seems really thick and it stands off of the canvas a bit. I forgot to put a glob in this one. So if your paint has some texture to it, that makes it look really dynamic. And now, just like we went through and we made some teeny stars with the yellow, you can go through and do that with the white. Just barely touch the canvas. If you get a good glob on your brush, see how it makes a little bit of a point? And you can just take and touch that point right to the canvas. Okay, so now because these stars are very thick and very wet, I'm gonna get my blow dryer out and dry this completely. We're gonna do one more thing and then we'll be done. So to finish up, we're gonna add a glow around these larger stars, the ones with white in them, and the moon. So I've cleaned off my round brush and I'm gonna load up with some yellow. I'm not gonna get globs of it, just some yellow. See, there's no chunks on here. And I'm just gonna use the tip of the brush and I'm just gonna kind of lightly swipe around it. So just kind of like that until the yellow stops coming off of the brush, especially around this larger one. And then I'm gonna get a little bit of white. And I'm gonna do the same thing, but I'm gonna concentrate the white in the middle. Kind of like we did with the fireflies in the Be the Light video. I'm gonna add a little bit more white to that. It's just kind of a scrub outward, not trying to fill in the entire thing. And I'm just going to do that to all of these larger stars. Just notice I'm not trying to cover the entire background. You can still see the purple peeking out and the blue peeking out. You don't want to cover it completely and just make a big yellow glob. If you happen to go over top of your bird or your power line while you're doing this, that's okay. I'd rather have you go over top of the black area than try and avoid it. It will look more natural. If you do go over the black area, you can just cover it up with some more black afterwards. See how I went over her tail a little bit? I'll just cover that up with some black. And we're gonna do that around the moon. So I got a little extra brush, a little extra water on my brush. Get some yellow. And I'm gonna go all the way around the moon just like the other ones. His circle is gonna be nice and big. Keep a little extra water on there. And let these rays overlap other stars. It doesn't have to stop just because there's a star in the way. Let's do a little bit on the inside. And then we'll do our white on everything. Ooh, that one got kind of ugly. So I'm gonna take my angle brush. I wet it in the jar and then wiped it on the paper towel a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of scrub that out. I just felt like the line there was too hard. Keep wiping it on your paper towel. After you wipe every single time, go back and wipe it on your paper towel to get that extra paint off. And I'm actually going to amp up the highlights on my moon so that it's not lost in the center here. So I'm just taking some white around the inner edge here so that it's nice and bright in the center. And I didn't add any of the white highlights onto the inside because I feel like that would have made my moon get lost a little bit, but you can if you want to. So I cleaned off my brush and I'm just going to touch up the birds in the line where I got some of the star shine on them. And there is your starry night for Lovebirds. I hope you enjoyed painting this with me, and I hope that you also enjoy painting it with someone that you love, even if that someone is yourself. Again, you don't have to paint this on 2 separate canvases. You can use one canvas. You can use a long one like this one that I'm bracing my canvases with. The one in the back here is 12 by 36 inches. You could do it on that or on just a 16 by 20, whatever you want. I'm also starting to get a lot of canvases piling up with paintings from previous videos. Sometimes I paint over them, and so if you see me painting on a canvas that's been painted before, it very well could have been the painting from the previous video. That always kind of makes me feel bad, and I've had quite a few people ask me if I sell my paintings. So I think what I'm going to start doing is if I particularly like a painting that I did for a video, I'm going to put it on my website and put it up for sale. And I'll include a link in the description below to that as well. As always, guys, feel free to share on my Facebook page. There's a link in the description below, or you can just go onto Facebook and search Painting with Jane and you'll find me. So remember, next week, my setup in my new studio is gonna be a little bit better. I will have much better lighting. I'm only using a really awful ceiling fan light today, and I have both of the windows open and the light is not fabulous in here, but it'll be better next week. And I'm really excited to show you how my videos are going to change after I get my B&H order next week. Also, please make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe so that you never miss a video. Now that I have my painting studio set up at home, it's quite possible that I will start putting out more than 1 video a week. So thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.